Welcome, everybody, to the Arch City Poker Podcast. My name is Tony, alongside Nick. We own, operate, and run ArchCityPoker.com. Nick, how you doing today?
I'm great. Excited to be here as always.
Awesome. If you have not caught last week's episode, go ahead and take a look on YouTube, like, share, and subscribe. And you may notice that our overlay is just a little bit different in case you're not familiar with a lot of the social media accounts that we have, where we post a lot of the highlight reels, the session reviews, the hand history reviews, a lot of the things and a lot of the types of news updates that we have for ArchCityPoker.com. Take a look. You might find something that you like. And Nick, today we're going to be talking about the different stakes in poker and the differences between each stake. Because I would argue that everybody listening has different experiences or no experience with stakes outside of the one that they feel the most comfortable with. And I would imagine that the largest player pool is 1-2-1-3. And maybe they've taken a shot at 2-5, perhaps not. Maybe some 2-5 listeners have taken a shot at 5-10, and maybe some 5-10 listeners haven't taken any shots above that. And I think there's just like a lot of misconceptions, a lot of things to talk about that I think the poker community in general may have a misunderstanding or misrepresentation of. And I think we can really unmuddy the waters, if you would, Nick. Some great stuff to talk about. But yeah, Nick, before we begin, just want to say that I did have a successful 5-5-10 session last night. Not to brag, but went pretty well for myself. And really digging it. And really want to get back and start playing some bigger stakes in some different locations again. I know I took a trip to Chicago, but I think that only kind of opened up the menu page a little bit for me. Now I want to go more places and try different stakes at different locations and test my kind of iron versus iron type, iron sharpens iron type of thing. So yeah, we'll see.
We gotta get you on the maybe the lodge, and then we can review it.
You know, I really thought about that. I'm like, well, maybe I should go to San Antonio or go to Austin and try to finagle a way onto the live stream and play even if it's like a 1-3 deep stack game or a 2-5 deep stack game. I think that'd be fun. I don't know how I would do it, but I'm down to do it. I'm down to try.
Yeah.
So Nick, the first thing we're going to talk about is the stake of 1-2. It is the 1-2-1-3. We're going to kind of mold those two into the same because it is where the largest player population plays. It is the kind of gateway to poker, live low stakes poker. In every single poker room, they either have 1-2, 1 or 1-3 as the lowest stake available. And for those players, if you were just to kind of give a synopsis of like, what are the tendencies? What are the aspects of like 1-2, 1-3 that like the average player going into any room around the nation, they're probably prone to experience?
I mean, in general, you'll see a lot of loose passive play, I would say. 1-2 and 1-3. I mean, it's like when we get into skill level between 2-5, I don't really think there actually is a difference, but there's a difference in how people how they're bad is what the difference is. But yeah, 1-2 and 1-3, I mean, it's a lot of loose passive play, a lot of really straightforward play, a lot of if you know how to hand read, then your opponent's cards will be kind of face up on their foreheads. You will not see a lot of post-flop aggression like you should see in a lot of spots. So yeah, I would say in general, just a lot of loose, passive, pretty ABC play overall, which, you know, the majority of you guys listening or watching, you know this, but, you know, if you're a little newer to the game and you're just kind of starting out and you're wondering if your room is similar to most other rooms regarding, you know, your 1-2 or 1-3 population, yeah, they're pretty much all the same, from my experience. Yeah.
No, you're right. And again, you nailed it, which is just like most people kind of acknowledge this, but if you're listening and you're not really observant over kind of how the rest of the room is playing, you know, there's just a lot of limping. There's a lot of players. Again, the player population for 1-2, 1-3 is your average everyday person. It's the person who works at an auto body dealership. It's the person who got done changing tires all day, working construction, like doing Lord knows what. and they come to the casino to vent or to take a break or to get away. And they're not really looking and thinking about, stack to pot ratio and what their image is,
Right.
what the range looks like, what their opponent's range looks like. They're looking at their two cards and they're trying to make the trying to get blackjack.
They're playing well, yeah, the reference I've used before on this platform for almost a decade is like they're playing like a slot machine. Like
Mm-hmm.
they are putting coins in to try to hit something basically.
Yeah. And they do often enough to where it doesn't matter how good your skill is. If you're all in pre with aces and they have 7-8 suited and they bank 2 7s, it's just the way it's going to be, which is why they keep coming back, which is what we need to have happen. So,
Right.
but that's 1 2 1 3 in a nutshell. There's not a lot of complicated information to talk about when we think about 1 2 1 3. But I think the first large misconception that most players are going to have is the difference of what the game is like from 1 2 and 1 3 to 2 5. Now, we're going to, when we reference 2 5, we're not talking about a $500 buy-in. We're going to talk about maybe 1,000 or even higher than that. Because if it's 500, it probably plays the same. This, like most 1 2 1 3s are going to have up to a $500 buy-in anyways. So we're going to pretend that the 2 5 games that we're referencing are a bit higher than that, maybe 200 bigs or even more, maybe even a match the stack kind of environment. But Nick, from your experience, if you were to say to somebody like, hey, you're going to sit in 1 2 and 1 3, and then you're going to go sit in 2 5, and I want you to tell me the differences, what do you think that they would tell you?
More aggression in general. It's not like crazy amounts, but it's definitely more pre-flop raising, more three betting,
Mm-hmm.
potentially a little more bluffing or semi-bluffing post-flop. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned it. No more than maybe a minute ago that to me, when I've been asked about this, and I have worked with some students in the past. It's been a little bit, but I've worked with some students that were mainly 1 2 1 3, and they're trying to get better and get good enough to where they can beat 2 5. And there definitely is a misconception as far as the skill level. Like there isn't really a gap. I think it's actually almost the same exact skill level for the most part. Now, if you have a guy that's obviously the some of the best players within the 2 5 pool, the biggest winners, like there's going to be a pretty big gap there between the guys and maybe the guys that are beating 1 3 potentially. But I kind of alluded to this before that the difference between 1 3 and 2 5, there's really two things in my mind that I always go to. One is that you kind of mentioned it, Tony. Like 1 3 actually now these days, currently in the year 2026, a lot of rooms that are 1 3, like they cap it at 100 bigs. And then some rooms go a little bit above that. But then, the next stakes up, like 2 5, they not a lot of the rooms cap it at 100. It actually is a little bit more than that. It's either 150 a lot of times or 200. So the difference in the games is just simply that you're playing a hard big blind poker in one, and then one population you don't have to bind for the 200 bigs, but a lot of guys do. A lot of guys want to play 2-5 because they want to play deep stack, live poker. So that game's going to play quite a bit different. Now, are guys playing properly, like how we suggest you should play 200 bigs? Not exactly. Like some guys might, they might implement aspects of what we're saying, but the big difference is just stack depth. Um, the next difference, really, though, is like both populations are bad at poker. But the 1 3 and the 1 2 and 1 3 populations, yeah, I mean they just are. Like I've said this before, guys, like humans are bad at poker. We could get talking all the way up to 10, 20, 25, 50, and you're still going to find a lot of bad poker players relative to, what should be happening in theory. But point I'm making is that 1 2 and 1 3, the pool is bad in a passive manner. In 2 5, it's still pretty passive, but you can, when you get more aggression, so to speak, it doesn't mean those players are necessarily better. Like they might, like, aggression's gonna be better than passiveness just as a default. But some of the players in 2-5 are going to be bad aggressive as opposed to most of like the pass or the bad passive players that you find mostly at 1 2 and 1 3. So I don't want to get this twisted, guys. And I think Tony would echo my sentiment. I'm not saying that like as soon as you guys, if you haven't played it, I'm not saying as soon as you jump into 2-5, all of a sudden it's an aggressive poker game, but there's a good chance that it's definitely going to be more aggressive than on average than the 1-2 or 1-3. But this, as far as skill gap, like skill set that players have, it's not really all that different in my opinion. Like it's very much the same. Just it's just how are they? Like they're bad, but they're bad in different ways. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. And I would say a lot of the players that play 2-5 have the knowledge and the skills of a 1-2, 1-3 player. They just don't feel like the adrenaline rush or like
Yeah.
the excitement of not playing for as much money. So they hop up into 2-5 and just kind of play the same style for the most part. They're still limping. Um, the biggest difference, and you mentioned it, you hit it right on the head. The biggest difference is you're now entering an environment where three betting is a little bit more common. And it doesn't always mean aces, kings, ace, king, ace, queen anymore, where it does in 1-2, 1-3, where three bets and four bets gets extremely nutty. It is, unless the player specifically three betting is doing so a lot, we can usually err on the side of caution and say a three bet at live low stakes 1-2, 1-3 is the upper left hand corner of their range chart. It's aces, kings, ace, king, ace, queen suited, queens, maybe jacks. In 2-5, because it's a little more prevalent, you start adding in stuff like king, queen suited. You start adding in jacks more regularly versus rarely, and start becoming three bets more often. So, Nick, we talk about like having different gears when we play, and I understand that you may not need to shift gears a whole lot going from 1-2, 1-3 to 2-5. But when you, let's pretend you do, and you're like, okay, I'm playing in a game that's a bit more aggressive. The stacks are a little bit deeper. I need to adjust my strategy to the table a little bit. And let's pretend, you shift gears. You go from 1 to 2.
Yep.
What are maybe some of the things that you are now adding and incorporating into your game that maybe took a back seat or they're just sitting on the sideline at 1-2, 1-3? And that's my watch telling me that it thought I said Siri. So
Oh, good. I mean, technical difficulties. No, I mean, I think for me, it actually goes back to stack depth again. Like, I'm trying to think of it as like somebody that, yeah, I guess like needs to alter their strategy a little bit. I mean, the big things, guys, are like in 2-5, you are generally gonna be playing a little bit deeper, so position matters more. Three betting is you're gonna be incentivized to do more of that in position, especially even when you're out of position to make sure you do lower the SPR. Like it's just three betting in general is just gonna be better. Um, the types of hands that play well in that type of game, compared to like if you're playing 100 big blind 1-2 or 1-3, you're just trying to really pip your opponents for the most part. I'm not saying that you can't jump in there with some middling pairs or suited connectors or gappers or other stuff. I mean, I use all kinds of stuff as Tony has seen, but it's different when you do have like high level confidence in your post flop skill set and you understand how to wiggle in and out of even 100 big blind poker situations, maybe a little bit wider. But even myself, like I'm not doing anything like too outside the norm, especially pre-flop in those 100 big blind 1-2, 1-3 games. Now, if I feel that in my mind, I'm always thinking to myself before I enter, we talk about this like your mental game, having kind of a pre-game routine or warm up, if you will. And, if I'm on a 2-5 list in the day and I know that game's very likely to get off, then kind of scan the list. Like if I know the guys, if they're regulars, to kind of get a feel for, in general, what kind of pots am I going to be playing in? Like what kind of players are in this game? What kind of mistakes do they make that I can exploit? And sometimes it's not going to be all that different from 1-2 or 1-3. It's just deeper. Like I said, you're playing more position. You're three betting more. You're switching from the offsuit broadways that are a little bit better in the 1-2 and 1-3 with shallower stacks. Like you're kind of slashing a lot of those, and you're playing more of the ace X suited stuff, the king X suited stuff, the suited connectors, if you will. The hands that just play well in deep stack poker games. And the other part of it though is like I don't know if there's really necessarily things that I do in 1-2 or 1-3 that wouldn't work in 2-5, but there are some things that I think you guys do that get you into trouble where, like, let's say you have worked a little bit with a solver, or like you have watched some stream stuff, or you're quote what I call like a tryhard, like you have put in the work and you kind of know some theory type of stuff, and you try to apply it in these games. Like, there's some things that you guys might be doing that you're thinking, oh, it's 2-5. Like this guy probably thinks about what my range is in this spot and levels like that. And I think some of you take it too far to where like, um, I mean, I'm glad Tony brought you brought this up because like I think some guys take it too far is what I'm getting at as far as like switching gears, so to speak. Like I think when you just need to, I think stack depth is the biggest thing. Now, the one thing you do, I would say like if you want one little nugget to look for is that your opponents like I said, still loose passive for the most part in 2-5, but you will get some guys that are willing to barrel a little bit more post flop, and they are willing to be a little bit wider with their pre flop raising ranges. Pre flop, like I said, as well. So, and it kind of depends. It kind of depends on the room and the game and the time of night, because you can get some really wide pre flop raising ranges in 1-2 and 1-3, as we know. But if you get maybe some nittier guys or some more docile tables, and then you move to 2-5, like yeah, you need to adjust by understanding that you can exploit them by 3 betting more. They're probably not going to be 4 betting you in 2-5, like to exploit you. Look out for them barreling, like especially the more aggressive players, the younger players. They're going to be barreling a little bit more, so you can add in, exploitively some slow plays against that type of thing, and then you can play back at them exploitively with more bluffs and semi bluffs. Like that's one way you talked about attacking like the really aggressive guys. So there's a few little nuggets, I guess, at the end there, Tony. But I just think in general, like, don't overcomplicate it. Don't overcompensate just because you see 2-5 on the plaque on the table. Understand, most importantly, stack depth. And that's going to be the most important thing as far as how you alter your strategy and change gears.
Yeah. I mean, that rings true in just about every environment that I've played in as well. When I would say if we were to like talk about changing gears and like what could happen that takes place in 2-5 that does not take place in a 1-2, 1-3 game. And you're right, it does correlate directly with stack to pot rate, like the stack depth, bleh. Because you can't really 4-bet in 1-2 with 100 big blind stack because it's a jam. You can't. It's never not for anything than someone's entire stack. If let's be dramatic here and let's pretend we're playing 1-2 and each player has $2,000, which is pretty rare. But when somebody opens to $15, a 3-bet could mean nothing because that's such a small part of what their stack is that they have the room and flexibility to be more aggressive pre-flop and create more environments for themselves. But if you have $100 and someone opens it to 15 and you're like, I want to make it 45, it's like, well, you're kind of pot committing your opponent here. They don't really have a lot of wiggle room. So they're either going to go with their hand right away or they're just not. And in the higher stakes games, as those stack depths increase, there's a lot of maneuverability. So the biggest thing is you're going to see more 3-bets at 2-5, but you still won't see 4-bets very often. You'll see them, but it's kind of, we talked about this, it's kind of like the 3-bets in 1-2. A 3-bet in 1-2, in my mind, is the same as a 4-bet in 2-5, where there's much more credit to the 3-bet in 1-2. There's a lot more credit to the 4-bet in 2-5. So, and as you go higher, that
I
can
think
change.
that's a pretty good comparison. Like I would say the other thing as far as like if you guys want more from me as far as like a more specific answer, changing gears or whatnot. I mean, in live low stakes poker, guys, like you just want to be one level or one step ahead. You don't want to go further than that. And that's where a lot of you guys get in trouble when you use things like GTO Wizard. Um, there's all these levels and layers to the game that I think a lot of players get caught up in this. They get tangled up in the spider web, so to speak. And you don't need to really even be in the web in the first place. Like in 1-2 and 1-3, like Tony was saying, if somebody 3-bets me, I mean, unless I have like top of range, I'm pretty much just folding. Like, I mean, they just tend to, most of the guys just aren't really exploiting you opening, a normal to wider range. Like they're just looking down at their 2 cards and thinking, I have a great hand, so I want to put more money in the pot. Whereas, and you might get this with like the bad aggressive guys that play one. You might have a guy that plays 1-3 and 2-5, but when you do get to 2-5, you get more of this player type where they know that players are opening probably too wide on average, and so they do 3-bet. So, to be a step ahead of them, in 1-2 and 1-3, my step ahead was to exploit the population by folding. Whereas in 2-5, my step ahead is to actually be four betting. And like Tony mentioned, there's not a lot of four bets. I would say on average, if you guys are a 2-5 regular and you're not the one that has the highest four bet percentage of your table, you're probably wrong because you're probably leaving a lot of money on the table. There's a lot of spots where you definitely can widen your four bet range and really exploit these guys that are, they're trying to be a step ahead of the pool by three betting more. So we're just gonna be one step ahead of them, and we don't need to take it any further than that. Like until proven otherwise, like that's the only thing you guys really need to do as far as going back to talking about altering your strategy or changing gears, if you will. Just be a step ahead of your opponent, understand stack depth, and that'll really help you out quite a bit. You don't have to overcomplicate the situation.
Yeah, true words. I've actually had that leak myself, which is, I have so much knowledge in things that I've kind of trained myself to look for. And it's almost gotten me in trouble because I just need to like kind of caveman it a little bit in a lot of circumstances. And when I overcomplicate things, it makes every decision much harder than it has to be.
Yeah.
And I'm not playing in games where my brain needs to work that hard in in any capacity, at least for all the hands that I'm playing in. Like there might be some tables, some nights where I do need to lock in, but it's few and far between. And yeah, like you said, Nick, the biggest change at 2-5 is we can open up our four bet aperture a little bit and really start punishing people because four bets are already rare. No one five bets without
Yeah.
the nuts. Like I've
Yeah.
never seen a five bet bluff at
Mm.
2-5. Never, ever, ever, ever. And if they have, and I was bluffed, good for them. Because
Yeah,
I
and
probably
if they
folded.
are right, and if they're like their five bet bluff is like ace king basically.
Yeah, that's about as bad as it gets.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, in 1-2 and 1-3, the hands that are very often folds to three bet, especially out of position. But like hands like ace 10 suited, king queen suited, king jack suited, those become prime four betting candidates
Mm-hmm.
when you're taking it and you're kind of adjusting and taking it to again, you just want to be a step ahead of your opponent, but we're a step ahead by exploiting with aggression in 2-5 probably by default, and then in 1-2 and 1-3 it's probably erring on the side of folding. When we're talking about, again, I don't want you guys to read too much into that. It's just that specific scenario with like the three betting, but it's just kind of giving you an example of like, yeah, there's some spots where we're kind of changing. Like I don't even know if I call it like necessarily changing gears. I mean, I guess it is in a way, but like it's just little adjustments just to say, just like I said, one little step ahead of your opponents and nothing more.
Yep. But again, the same fundamentals remain true. Stop limping at 1-2 and 1-3. Stop limping at 2-5. Start opening up your 3 and 4 bets more at 2-5. And at 1-3, you can open up your 3 bets more as long as your stacks are a lot larger, which is not usually the case, which is why it feels like you're kind of trapped in a box in 1-2, 1-3. Like it feels like you don't have a lot of maneuverability, and it feels like you have to play stronger cards because in a lot of circumstances you do, because stacks are so shallow. And when stacks are shallow, as we've talked about on the podcast, people get really attached to one pair holdings. So if we are going to stack off with one pair holdings, we need to have the better one pairs.
Yeah,
Instead
you
of
just want
king
to have a
queen, we need ace queen, right? Like
yeah.
that kind of stuff. But at 2-5, that's not the case at all. Because stacks are so much larger, we can three bet weaker hands and still have better hands than our opponents. So kind of a cool little adjustment. And I
Mhm.
would say, Nick, the next leap from 2-5 to 5-10 is probably the largest skill wise leap and adjustment that probably has to be made. And Nick, from your experience, and again, kind of the same thing from 1-2 to 2-5, but if we're going to talk from 2-5 to 5-10, same analogy. You're shifting gears, maybe you're not shifting gears. How are you approaching a game that's a 5-10? And what are maybe some of the larger differences that you see in a 5-10 field that you do a 2-5 field?
Yeah, this one's a little trickier just because like as you progress to these next kind of couple of stakes, it will depend a lot on the lineup. And I know you could say that for 1-2, 1-3, 2-5, but a lot of those lineups really kind of at the end of the day kind of blur together. 5-10, like let's say you play in a town or city or whatever that that's the biggest game that runs, right? At least as far as the biggest game that runs that's accessible to most people. Because once you start getting above like a 5-5, a 5-5-10, a 5-10, if you will, like a $10 blind structure, basically. Um, a lot of those games go private, and a lot of you don't really have access to those. So, uh, let's say like the most accessible game again is like a $10 blind structure or whatever. Then, you know, that's where all like the best skilled players probably are going to end up. And so, if you're in a place where 510 is truly mid stakes and you have like a lot bigger games, and there aren't a ton of places like that, but you can kind of see what I'm talking about, guys, where like then the cream rises to the top. And so there might be an easier 510 pool, in one part of the country, whereas in another part of the country, it might be it might actually be like a game with some really skilled guys. Now, having said that, some of those skilled guys, because they only have 510 available to them, maybe they have higher aspirations. Of course, you want to send in your career, make more, money if you play or whatever, especially play professionally. I know 99% of you don't, and I'm not saying you should, but those guys might move away, and then maybe that does like thin out the crowd. So getting back on, I guess we're still on topic, but like getting back to trying to answer Tony's question as accurately as I can. I mean, everything's just more exaggerated. Like there's going to be more aggression. So like we talked about, you don't really see 4 bets and 2-5. Like you're going to see definitely, like if it's like a pretty legit 5-10 pool, like you're going to see the 3-bet 4-bet game come to life, and even some 5 bets. Now, are the 5 bets still possibly really unbalanced, towards value or something? Like it can be. Like I said, it really depends. But you will see better post flop poker. You'll see better hand readers, guys that are, probably a lot better at exploiting others and exploiting the population, exploiting recreational players or fish, if you will. It doesn't, just because it's 510, it doesn't necessarily mean that every player is a professional. It doesn't mean that they are theoretically or they are fundamentally awesome players according to like a solver. But you will see a semblance of just better hand reading. If they are really good and they feel they have to implement balance, like you will see some of that. But don't get it twisted again. I know I keep saying that, but like 510 is still very beatable for just even like just good like human players, if you will. Like if you get what I'm saying, like it's not like it's an unbeatable stake, but again, it does depend on the pool. It is very lineup dependent, in my opinion, Tony. Like I think it depends where you are.
Yeah, I would agree. Most 510s that I have seen, I mean, maybe honestly, the Bellagio in Vegas is probably the smallest 510 I've seen, which is a $1,500 cap buy-in. There's no match stack. There's no 3/4 match. There's nothing. It's just straight up 1,500 and go. So in a game like that, you probably have a larger player population of a little bit of everything. It's not necessarily geared towards strength. It's probably people who just don't like 2-5 because they just want to play for more money. An average 2-5 or an average 5-10 game where we start to get into, average buy-in can be anywhere from 2,500 to 5,000 to match the stack. That's where you're going to start to see like some of the more skilled players start to enter that player population because there's much more, the stack depth is just massive compared to the stakes. And what you're going to see, like Nick alluded to, is 3-betting is much more, it's about as common as a standard open pre-flop. Again, kind of doing the analogies of 1-2 3-bet is the same as a 2-5 4-bet. And I would say at 510, I would say 5 bets are still a thing of rarity. I think you'll see 3 bets. I think you'll see some 4 bets because people are 3-betting more. People have to 4-bet more. So you'll see 4 bets more often. But again, a 5-bet is the only reason there can be a 5-bet is because stacks are so big. So when you see a 5-bet even at 510, it's representative still of large amounts of strength. And if someone is 5-bet bluffing, you're going to have seen it because they're going to be doing it much more often than probably what should be standard. So I would say at 510, Nick, you're going to see a lot more creative play. You're going to see people starting to call 3-bets a lot wider. So it's going to create a lot more dynamic situations where your 3 bets pre-flop don't really get folds because stack depths are so large that there's so much implied odds for things like small to medium pocket pairs. There's so many great opportunities to kind of isolate players heads up with some really large 3 bets. The biggest leak, Nick, that I think I still see at 510 is people's bet sizes. Whether it's pre-flop, whether it's post-flop, whether it's multi-way or not, people are still leading into large fields when they shouldn't be. They're picking sizes that don't really make sense. If it's a multi-way pot, and let's pretend we opened a $30 and somebody made it 100, we got 3 callers. We're going to go $300 into the pot. Let's go 4. Let's make a multi-way. We're 4 ways. $400 in the middle. And that pre-flop aggressor who 3-bet is going to lead into those 3 people for $400 into a $400 pot. And it's just sizing issues where it makes the decision tree for the villains extremely easy to navigate. And if they were to take a smaller sizing, as we've talked about in the Arch City Poker podcast many times, you're incorporating so much more of your opponent's range. You're giving them opportunities to make more mistakes on future streets. But if you're giving them, let's pretend, again, in a dramatic fashion for the sake of like what the conversation is, if there's 400 in the middle and we just rip 2,000 in there because we're scared of any overcards, we're just making the decision tree for our opponents so easy. And the worst player can play perfect poker against us. And as silly as that sounds, and maybe it's common sense to somebody, and maybe it's not, but bet sizing is still one of the largest leaks, even at 510, Nick, that I see.
Yeah.
Would you have kind of like similar experiences with that? Or like when you've played at maybe some of the higher stakes or some of the people that you've coached and some of their experiences, is that something that you're seeing as well?
For sure. Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely a ton of bet sizing errors. Like it's the most common mistake in just speaking in generalities that I see, even up to what would be considered today like nosebleeds from guys that I worked with, well pre-COVID. And I mean, at the end of the day, like again, that's why I keep saying like humans are pretty bad at poker, and I don't even just mean like I'm not talking about just I understand like we specialize in live low stakes. That's what this platform's all about. But I'm talking like everywhere. And obviously, the higher up you get, you run into some really good players. But like we've talked about this before, where like you see these high stakes stream games that are very popular, whether it's at Hustler, Lodge, wherever. And a lot of times, those games are for entertainment value, and so it's you might have 1 or 2 like crushers that are really good poker players in those games, but then a lot of times you just have people that are pretty well off, that are willing to gamble, that make the stream worth watching. Because if everybody played like solver approved poker, I mean, you could see some like pretty brilliant and aggressive and entertaining things, but like even the really good guys, like a lot of them don't really play like that. And so it definitely would be more rigid and a little more boring, whereas you've got the personalities, you've got the gamble that's in those streams. And you definitely see some bad poker, whether it's frequencies are out of whack, sizings are out of whack. You can see some good stuff, but yeah, I mean, it's bet sizing errors, frequency errors, like not we're able to exploit opponents because their frequencies are so out of whack. Like they don't check back flops with balance. They don't check raise rivers with balance. Like it's stuff like that. So yeah, Tone, anytime I see frequencies or sizings out of whack, I mean, I see the majority of it in the live low stakes, but you definitely see still a ton of it getting into the mid stakes, and I would say even probably still the higher stakes games that are played live today.
Yeah. You brought up a really interesting point. We can kind of pivot that way as well. So at like the 510 level, I don't know what the average viewer would consider like a live stream game and like what the skill level is for that. I would guess they are assuming that if this player, XYZ player, is invited to whatever live stream, that player must be good enough to be on that live stream. I think that's probably a pretty fair assessment, that they're not inviting trash skill level players. That's probably the assumption that's there. The reality is that in a live stream game, they're there to get views and they're there to get people that provide action, and they want people to play poorly. And as long as they have the money to make a fun stream, that player's invited back more often than not. Now they want some skill in there because they either are going to have a skilled commentator, they're going to have some people who are flying in from far away and they maybe wanted to play with somebody or they wanted to shot take. I think there's a few people on YouTube who's made a story out of like shot taking or putting their entire role active into a game just to kind of see how they're going to do and then they're winning or they lose. But I would say live stream games, Nick, are the epitome of like manufactured like soap opera TV where everything is staged, nothing's real, like everything's
Right.
dramatic because you have players that are specifically invited because they give action. Skill level is not included. It's their wallet size that's included. And it is much more fun to watch somebody like chase a gutter for 10K than it is to watch like OMC guy fold for 3 hours. Because we're like,
Yeah.
why are you folding ace queen pre? He's like, well, I don't want to run into ace king. It's like, well, that's not fun to watch.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, Nick, I mean, I agree with you. I would say historically that the live, unless we're talking like, oh, I don't know, what's a good live, like a live stream kind of segment or series? Maybe when Garrett was there live at the bike, it probably had 4 or 5 like really solid players. Then it had some pretty splashy guys in there.
Mhm.
If we were to take a look at even stuff like, was it Poker After Dark? This stuff where like, the Phil
Yeah.
Ivey and the Jennifer Tilly and like all those people that were on there, the movie stars, like that's another good example of like, yeah, some of those players are extremely good. Like Phil Ivey is phenomenal. Is Jennifer Tilly top tier? I mean, I don't know. I haven't
Yeah,
played with
they
her.
right. Yeah, they would have like a rotating lineup of like high stakes pros, guys that were beating, the equivalent of those games or whatever, and then they would bring in personalities or they would bring in like billionaire businessmen that they
Yeah.
knew were willing to put some money in. You need a good mix of, and I mean, even going down back to all the way back to like 1-3 and 2-5 guys, like kind of what you're probably really here for. Um, what makes those games good, and like you need a good mix of players. Like you would like to have a maniac, but do you really want two of them? Like that can make the game. It almost can be too much. Actually, believe it or not. So like you definitely want a good mix. I don't think you ever want a nit at the table, but it is nice to have a good mix of like a guy that he's willing to at least put some money in, but it might be like a guy that's putting it in all the time in a loose passive manner. And then you get a guy that's putting it in a more aggressive manner. It's definitely good to have a good mix and a good balance, and that's why you see that honestly in those stream games. Because if you had, I mean, I do remember some of like the Poker After Dark, some of those old school streams, like those were cool because a lot of times you did get the high stakes professionals, but you still got a good mix because this was all pre-solver, and so like you got a good mix of like exploitative play. You got some guys that are kind of more known as like rocks, but they had like I know he's a very polarizing figure, but like Mike Mattisau is like a good example where like Mattisau was candidly dog shit compared to like some of the internet guys that came up or Ivy. Like if it was Mattisau, Ivy, Dwan, Patrick Antonius, I mean Mattisau was absolutely the mark at the table. But his mouth is what kept getting him on the stream. Hellmuth is notoriously known as a horrific cash player. He's done nothing to improve his game over 20, 30 years, as far as, at least that variant. But he's there because he's Phil Hellmuth. He brings eyeballs. So, like, it's good to have a good mix of styles and personalities, whether it's a high stakes live stream or whether it is like your daily 1-3.
Yep. I want to ask you, Nick, I'm going to put you on the spot here. We have about time for one more question here.
Mhm.
And I don't know what the answer is. So, I budge you all the time about playing different games, all these different things. What stake level, whether it's, I don't know if it's 2.5, 5.10, higher, at what point are you actually shifting gears? Or when was the last time you had to shift gears? And like, what were some of the adjustments you made? What was the game like? Like, what was that environment like where you cranked it up a notch and like people got to feel like real Arch City poker strategies like rammed at them?
Um, well, funny enough, I like the two times that I guess I felt like I really needed to be on top of my game because I had a really strong skill set of players around me. I actually really probably wasn't using a ton of Art Shitty's like really exploitative strategies. Like I was, and that's why it's important to like have a good sound base so we can revert back to that if we need it. Because some of you guys might eventually your skill level might get good enough where you take shots at these games. But I played, I mean, real quick, like this was pre-COVID, but the 510 no limit in DC, at least the night I was playing was because I was there one time to play 5 card PLO basically, but I was kind of stuck waiting and I was in this no limit 510 and it was not the easiest game. Like I was actually a little surprised. I was like, I actually kind of was getting a feel for the table the first hour and I actually felt like I needed to implement some balance and like kind of be aware of what I'm representing. And I like 99% of the time never think about that stuff when I play. The only other time was kind of a funny story. I was playing 510 in Bellagio. Funny that you brought that up earlier. And this was a long time ago. And it was deep into, I would say, the night, but like the early morning hours. And the game broke. And the only two options I had were go back to 2-5 or go up to 10 quarter, I think it was, or was it 10-20? I don't remember what they ran, but and then that game broke. And so it was literally either 2-5. I was still wide awake. I was running really well. It was either 2-5 or a 25-50. And this 25-50, I jump in there. There's two like known really good professionals in it. And then there's a bunch of just like, from what I could tell, just like really rich, gambly, splashy players. So it actually felt that was the closest semblance to playing in what would be kind of like your modern day stream game, I would say. And it was funny because like I needed to be able to make some pretty drastic adjustments. If I'm in the pot with these really splashy players, I can do some like really exploitative stuff. But I knew that these other two that were very good and probably were better than me at this point for sure. Not even probably. Like I know they were better because they were cutting their teeth in games like that all the time when I didn't have access to those. And so these guys I know were paying attention though, and so I knew that when I was going if I had to get involved with them, then I need to pay a little bit of attention. And it was one of those things where like I didn't try to get too involved with them, and it's not like an ego thing. Like I knew where the money was to be made, and I knew that I was only had a little bit more time that night or the early morning hours to play. And so yeah, that one was interesting because there had to be some serious adjusting going on kind of on the fly as I went. But yeah, like it would take like a really tough player pool, um, at least 510. I would say higher than that for me personally. I think to feel like I would have to deviate from a lot of what we're teaching you guys to implement a little more balance and be a little more aware of what I'm repping to them. That's kind of the next level, and then you get into all the levels and layers of the game, and that's where like yeah, like GTO Wizard Rap and Pio Solver, like those are things that I would have to revert back to and kind of shake the rust off a little bit. But yeah, I would say anything below that though, like and like I said, guys, like kind of wrapping it up from my end, like if you play 1-2 or 1-3, don't fret about moving up and taking shots or playing 2-5. It's the same. It's just a little bit different. Like we said, go back earlier in the episode and we talked about how they're different. 2-5 to 510, it's kind of the same thing. You do see a skill jump, I would say, from 510 to the next levels. That's where you can see some serious skill gaps and jumps in skill. But again, it depends on the lineup and what kind of game. I mean, if you're playing in a private 10 quarter game that's built around like a few huge fish, like that's going to play a lot differently than maybe like a really tough 10 quarter somewhere else, like maybe in a casino or something. Like it just kind of depends. But yeah, as far as the live low stakes games, like we're talking 1-2, 1-3, 2-5, 5-10, there are still tons of bad players as you move up. They're just bad in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I remember some of that sounds familiar. I remember you kind of talking about some of those games you were in. I know
Yeah.
for myself, I think probably the most competent game that I played in, at least, was actually fairly recently, which was the 5-10-20 in Chicago. I thought
Mhm.
was pretty dang tough. Just because, let me rephrase, it wasn't tough. It was an entirely different game than what I was traditionally playing. So I had to spend the first portion of each of my session adjusting to the game, which for years I've played a very specific player pool and gotten very accustomed to like how they 3-bet, how they 4-bet, how they do XYZ. But in Chicago, I mean, I think the first like, oh, okay, this is the type of game we're playing now, which is, there were no cold calls and then seeing a flop. Every single hand was 3-bet. Every single hand was, if not 3-bet, 4-bet. There was not somebody opens the button and one of the blinds calls. Somebody opens from under the gun and the button calls and you go heads up to a flop. Not one time. And the 2 times that I even, before I was like, as I was getting acclimated, and I was like, oh, here's a pretty good spot that maybe we can flat on the button with a pretty strong hand against an early position open. We're going to see a flop in position. Oh, all the makings of XYZ ABC poker here. Looking good. It would be like small blind with 3-bet and the under the gun with 4-bet. And I'm like, what is okay? All right. I'm sorry. My bad. But yeah, otherwise, Nick, I think really kind of a fun topic. And then if you go above 10-20, I mean, that's an entirely different, probably podcast or conversation that has to take place. But again, Nick, to kind of harp on what you said again, 1-2, 1-3, it's the largest, most diverse player pool that's going to have most of your Joe Schmoes in there. You're going to have some good players sprinkled in, but not enough compared to how many people are there. At 2-5, that gets thinned out a little bit and stacks get deeper. Not that the player skill edge gets better, but the stacks get deeper, which means there's more 3-bets. So it feels more aggressive, even though the player skill level has maintained relatively the same. At 5-10, you can kind of consider that enthusiasm for aggression is more refined at 5-10. So it feels more deliberate. It feels more creative. It feels more specific. There's a lot of aspects to 5-10 that kind of make you think you can't just like auto click a 4-bet because someone's 3-betting anymore, trying to take advantage of a spot. So yeah, I think 5-10 is probably where the largest skill leap takes place, and where if you are going to adjust your game, that's probably where you're going to have to do some reflection and be like, okay, I know what my standard decision is here, but based on the table dynamics, what do I really need to lock in here? Because stack depths at 5-10 can get massive. But yeah, Nick, that's really going to wrap up episode 32. But do you have any closing remarks or comments?
No, I think you covered it.
Awesome. All right, everybody, we're going to wrap up episode 32. If you did not already and you're watching this on YouTube, like, share, and subscribe. You're going to notice at the bottom of this overlay that we have here, we have TikTok, X, YouTube. We have a Discord channel for you to talk about any of your poker hand histories, ask us questions, give us feedback. We love to hear it. But otherwise, everybody, thank you so much, and tune in next week for episode 33. Take care.